Vice President Kamala Harris has called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, urging Hamas to agree to a 6-week ceasefire proposal that's currently on the table. She also called on Israel to increase the flow of aid into the Gaza Strip, according to the New York Times. Let's hear some of that speech she gave this weekend.
People in Gaza are starving. The conditions are inhumane. And our common humanity compels us to act. As President Joe Biden said on Friday, the United States is committed to urgently get more life-saving assistance to innocent Palestinians in need. And given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire. For at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table. This will get the hostages out and get a significant amount of aid, and the Israeli government must do more to significantly increase the flow of aid. No excuses.
Harris reiterated that the push from the Biden administration for a ceasefire agreement in Gaza, where she said there is, quote, a humanitarian catastrophe taking place. Now, Pennsylvania Senator John Fetterman wrote on X on Sunday, the same day Kamala Harris gave that speech, quote, at any point, Hamas could have ended this burgeoning tragedy to surrender and release every hostage. Now they're unwilling to provide a list of any surviving hostages. Hamas is anathema to peace for Gaza. Hamas instigated and owns this humanitarian catastrophe. So very different note he's sounding there. But Kamala Harris, I wonder if the White House, looked at the level of support for the uncommitted vote in Michigan, is seeing all the criticism it's getting, and sat down with Kamala Harris and said, okay, this is your new job. You're going to be the point man on Gaza, and you are going to try to take some of this heat off Biden by making the remarks she did for a ceasefire, calling on Israel to do more, et cetera. The question is, that I turn to you, is that actually going to make any difference? Is that reassuring to people who are horrified by what's going on?
So what I think is first really important to stress is that this is a temporary ceasefire, the likes of which has not passed muster from Hamas's perspective throughout these negotiations, because what Hamas ultimately wants is some reassurance that the remaining Palestinians in Gaza are not going to be ethnically cleansed, or that the murder and starvation campaign isn't going to continue. So, of course, we have 30,000 people who have been killed since October 7th in Gaza. There have been explicitly articulated plans by various members of the Israeli government that say they want to permanently occupy Gaza. The U.S. does not agree with a permanent occupation, but Israel has said they want to set up a border zone within Gaza, has talked about the fact that they do not believe Palestinians should have self-determination and that Gaza should be run by a cadre of foreign parties. So all of those kinds of things are exactly why there has been no forward movement on the question of hostage release and a more permanent ceasefire. I think what Hamas is worried about is the idea that they do a 6-week ceasefire, that the hostages are released, and that at that point going forward, there remains no bar to continue the bombing campaign, with withholding food and the like, et cetera. So I do think there's some sophistry happening here where, on some level, it's a good thing that the administration is responsive to the fact that there have been so many protests in support of Palestine, that the uncommitted vote was successful as it was. Uncommitted is also launching campaigns in a number of other states, so it's far from over. But I do think from the public's perspective, you're asking if this is going to be influential. Well, it depends on how knowledgeable the public is about the likelihood that this temporary ceasefire is actually going to meaningfully stop the enormous loss of life that has been going on in Gaza.
Right. I mean, the issue is Israel and the U.S. do not want Hamas to remain in leadership over the Gaza Strip. So
correct.
They are committed to continuing a war effort, even if there's a temporary ceasefire to exchange hostages. Well, they're then going to continue trying to remove Hamas from power. That's the stated goal, and not one that Hamas
and that's why people are so upset,
well,
and that's why people are protesting, because
and that's why there can be no ceasefire.
The general public the general public believes that it's not appropriate to kill 30,000 people, 70% of whom are women and children, with this amorphous goal of defeating Hamas, which people, as we discussed at length in the show, Robby, across the political spectrum, have articulated as not a plausible goal, especially since when you kill 30,000 people, you're killing people's loved ones, children, parents, etc. And frankly, you're giving breath to resistance movements who want a more permanent solution, which is permanent, lasting self-determination for the people of Palestine. You're also seeing in the statement from John Fetterman an explicit, almost honest acknowledgement of what they think is appropriate behavior-wise from the Israeli government in order to achieve that goal. And I think what we're seeing is that the public simply does not agree with Fetterman. So he tweeted over the weekend on March 1st that he rejected statements from nations with atrocious human rights records, China, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, who had condemned Israel's behavior. Remember, at the end of last week on Thursday, there was this horrific event where a food truck, which have been very scantily supplied to northern Gaza in particular, was delivering food. A crowd emerged, and Israeli forces shot into the crowd, killing over 100 individuals. And at least one person was reported also at the same time was run over by a vehicle, resulting in an incredibly gruesome image that I think was very polarizing and shocking to people. The person had their hands bound, and it seemed a particularly cruel moment. Israel responded that it was a mob, that people had been killed through crushing and pushing and being trampled under feet. Subsequent medical reports said that most of the deaths were caused by bullets, really undermining the IDF's account of what had happened there. So following that, you have Fetterman saying, any tragedy, no matter how gruesome, even running over somebody with a vehicle whose hands are bound, shooting starving people who are clamoring for food in the head, all of those are Hamas. So if you believe that, at what point are you simply giving Israel, the IDF, a blank check to behave in any way, no matter how cruel or in violation of international law toward the people of Palestine? And that is, I think, what people are objecting to.
Well, I mean, you say it's a lot of people, but again, looking at that Harvard-Harris poll I showed last week, showing 82% support for Israel over Hamas and 2/3 of people supporting a ceasefire only after Hamas is removed from power. I saw Fetterman himself has improved his favorability rating in Pennsylvania by like 15 points over the last several months. So I know that there are certainly people within the Democratic Party, the progressive wing of it, who are very upset with what's going on, and maybe that makes enough of a difference in Michigan to cost Biden ultimately, but I don't know that what's going on is actually contrary to public opinion.
I can't show you this image because it's too gruesome, and frankly, even the blurred out image is one of the most horrific things that I've ever seen. But I'm pretty confident that when folks say they support Israel, they don't support Israel raiding the panty drawers of Palestinian women and posting them on social media. They don't support zip tying Palestinians and running them over with tanks until their bodies resemble something like a bag of crushed tomatoes with arm pieces sticking out here and there. They don't support the murder of over 10,000 children. They don't support allegations of sexual assault. And they don't support the demolition of hospitals, universities, and the like. And so that's the question, whether or not the Biden administration can attract voters and maintain support, not by abstractly supporting Israel, but supporting what has been described by the ICJ as a plausible genocide.
No, but I think they support the removal of Hamas, an organization that staged the terrorist attack on October 7th.
Even if it requires a plausible genocide, even if it results in 30,000 plus dead. So that's the question.
Warfare does result in innocent deaths, and as we said there,
not
the
this
administration
many.
says,
as I mentioned on the show, the death rate of civilian to target ratio is the worst of any war that we've seen in the 21st century. Israel is conducting a worse war. Even if all war is bad, this one is particularly gruesome, and in fact,
because
is potentially ethnic cleansing and genocide.
The terrorists are embedded in the civilian population, and
all right. So the argument is genocide okay if it's to get Hamas? And I think most people are saying no, they don't agree with that.
I think they're saying it's Hamas's fault for launching this attack and then hiding within the civilian population, and that if they would surrender and accept the ceasefire, it would be a good thing to go. All right, more Rising right after this.